Number 1.
Ashley and her friend, Loria Bible, were both abducted by strangers from Freeman's trailer home in Welch, Oklahoma on December 30, 1999. It was Ashley's birthday, so Loria spent the day with her. They went to Pizza Hut in Veneta, Oklahoma with Ashley's mother, Kathy Freeman, during the evening. The three women traveled in Kathy's blue-colored Toyota. They also traveled to get food for the Freemans' livestock and water from Kathy's mother's home. Their trailer did not have running water and was primarily heated by a wood-burning stove in the living room area. The Freeman family were described as avid hunters and great outdoorsmen. The trailer did have electricity and a telephone service in 1999. The Freemans also had numerous firearms piled inside of their home, and Ashley was known to assist the family in hunting for food. Loria's mother, Lauren, is the one who made the statement regarding the Pizza Hut visit, and it contradicted the belief that the girls and Kathy visited Big Bill's bar back in the 350 block of North Wilson Street in the Veneta area. After Ashley, Kathy, and Loria finished their dinner, they went to a local Walmart where they met Ashley's boyfriend, Jeremy Hurst. He gave Ashley a heart-shaped pendant with her birthstone embedded in it on a silver chain for her birthday present. He returned to the Freeman trailer with the three women, and he said nothing appeared unusual while he was there. It's unknown when exactly Hurst left the trailer. He said he left at 9:30 p.m., but relatives who were also at the trailer said Hurst actually left the trailer at 10:30 p.m. Investigators have stated that there were no phone calls made from the trailer home during the night of December 30th. At 6 a.m., a passing motorist noticed a fire in the vicinity of the Freeman trailer and called authorities. When authorities searched the debris of the trailer that afternoon, they discovered the body of Kathy. She was shot to death execution style. Initially, investigators believed no other bodies were inside the burned trailer. As a result, investigators named Danny as a primary suspect in his wife's murder and believed he abducted both Loria and Ashley. However, all vehicles belonging to the Freemans were in the driveway of the home. Loria's car was also nearby with the keys still inside the ignition. There was no evidence of the girls in the trailer. The next morning, Loria's father, Jay Bible, discovered the remains of Danny inside the bedroom of the trailer. His remains were partially covered by the debris of the trailer, explaining why his remains were overlooked. Like Kathy, Danny was killed by gunshot wounds. The Bibles returned to the trailer that morning to search for evidence leading to Loria and Ashley. Lauren did find Loria's purse propped inside of the trailer, but no other trace of the girls were ever found. The medical examiner discovered that Danny's right collarbone was fractured prior to him being shot, and the coroner was able to pinpoint that Kathy was killed around 5 a.m. Investigators believed the fire was deliberately caused so that the murderers could destroy evidence of the crimes. They searched extensively for the two girls but never found them. Investigators at one point considered the possibility that the girls were involved in the murders, since no evidence of their whereabouts was uncovered through searching. This has since been disputed as there's nothing in Loria or Ashley's backgrounds to suggest they could have committed such a brutal crime. They were both considered good students in 1999. They also found the girls wouldn't have run away since Ashley was scheduled to take her driver's test the day after the kidnappings, and Loria had a dentist appointment and planned to leave the trailer shortly before that. Lauren Bible told news reporters that Ashley was saving up money to purchase a used vehicle at the time of her abduction. Lauren said she thought Ashley had managed to save $1,200 in her savings account. Hurst, however, said that Ashley claimed to have saved between $3,000 and $4,000 for the car. She worked part-time at a convenience store known as Roscoe's in the Welch area. Hurst additionally states that Ashley did not have a bank account and kept her money inside of a Tupperware container, that's why stored inside the freezer in her home. Despite this, authorities found no evidence of the cash in the rubble of the Freeman trailer. Lauren also stated that Ashley and Danny were arguing regarding the vehicle earlier in December of 1999. Ashley apparently wanted to purchase a different vehicle than Danny wanted her to get. He had a violent temper. The Freeman family was ordered to participate in a counseling program through the Oklahoma Department of Human Services in 1998 after Shane stole his uncle's pickup truck. Shane returned to his previous behavior after a short period of time. Danny was charged with abusing Shane in late August of 1998 after a school counselor notified the authorities that Shane's buttocks were bleeding and bruised. Danny maintained that the incident was overblown, while prosecutors contended that he used excessive force. Shane told the court that he was no feared his father during a pre-trial hearing. Several relatives stated that Shane's problems were the result of him trying to please Danny. He was previously charged with beating his father-in-law after the latter trimmed his bushes without consent in 1985. Kathy's parents told reporters that Danny's temper often hurt her and their children. He also reportedly grew marijuana for his own usage near the family's trailer home. Danny was occasionally unemployed as a result of a work-related injury, and the family relied on Kathy's income from her job with Doctors Optical Supply Company Incorporated. Kathy was described as a dependable and caring person. Shane broke into the Bible family home in early January 1999. The family filed a complaint with police and stated that Shane took some of Lauria's belongings and money. Shane also stole several of the Bible family's firearms. In 1999, Shane Freeman was shot and killed by police officer David Hayes. Hayes was on duty at the time of Shane's death. Shane allegedly stole a vehicle and was on a country road when Hayes encountered him at the time. The car Shane stole had broken down, and Shane allegedly reached behind his back and grabbed a gun which prompted Hayes to shoot him. Shane's death was investigated thoroughly, and Hayes' actions were found to be justified with no malicious intent whatsoever. Hayes and his brother, who is also a police officer, were both given polygraph exams after the girls went missing in 1999 and are not considered suspects in their cases. They have not participated in any searches for the girls. Several of Danny's family members originally believed that local law enforcement might have been involved in the killings and the kidnappings, but there's no evidence to support this possibility. They also believe that Shane was simply trying to flee the scene from Hayes and didn't actually pull out a gun. They also claim his autopsy report contradicts the official verdict on the incident. Lauria's family believes that the case might be drug-related and that Danny's possible marijuana dealing had some role in the murders and disappearance. They believe he became involved in a situation that he couldn't control, which would ultimately seal the fates of him, Kathy, and the two girls. In October of 2001, several relatives of each girl participated in the pilot of the television show What Really Happened. The show was not purchased by any TV networks and was never broadcast anywhere. A woman named Deanna Dorsey also appeared on the show at the time. She was a nurse who assisted the Freeman family on the night that Shane was killed. Her daughter at the time was also a good friend of Ashley. Shortly after returning from the taping, Deanna was shot and killed at the hospital she worked at. It was concluded that paranoid schizophrenic Ricky Martin murdered her after he became angry about the hospital's decision to downsize. He was killed by police shortly after Deanna was murdered. He never even met his victim before her death. There was immense speculation that Deanna's murder was related to the 1999 cases, but no proof has been found to support this theory. Several people have confessed to the murders of Kathy and Danny, and to abducting and murdering both girls. In May of 2002, convicted murderer Tommy Lynn Sells wrote a letter to the Joplin Globe and claimed he was involved in the cases. Tommy claimed he traveled through Welch, Oklahoma during the night of the girls' disappearance and said he was returning from St. Louis, Missouri. He said his memory was disrupted and clouded by drug usage, but he did state he wanted to remember the fire and the burial locations of the two girls. He was considered a possible suspect in the case. He was arrested after stabbing a teenage girl in Del Rio, Texas in late December of 1999. He was convicted of all charges against him, and he was also convicted of killing a young girl in Texas in April of 1999. Authorities suspect Tommy was involved in multiple other homicides. It's been considered he was involved in the 1993 disappearance of Juanita Barden from Texas, and he purportedly confessed to the murder of Stephanie Stroh, who went missing from Nevada in 1997. Barden was not murdered in 1993, she lived for 19 years after that, and was discovered to have passed away in October of 2012. Tommy was never criminally held accountable for the Bible Freeman case. Another man named Jeremy Brian Jones was considered a possible suspect in the case. He was charged with the murders of a teenage girl and a woman, and is suspected in disappearances and murders in various other states. He is also a suspect in the disappearance of Melinda McGee from Alabama and the murder of Patricia Endress. Jeremy lived in Ottawa County, Oklahoma in 1999, and was released from prison at 10:30 p.m. during the night of Lauria and Ashley's disappearance. He also left the area in early 2000. Investigators have noted similarities between the murders of Kathy and Danny and one of his victims who was shot. Jeremy was questioned by investigators regarding Ashley and Lauria's disappearance, and he reportedly confessed to killing Kathy and Danny before abducting and killing the girls after fleeing the trailer. He told investigators to look in a mine shaft near Galena, Kansas. He has denied the confession ever occurred, and searches turned up no signs of the girls. The case remained a mystery until April 2018. That month, investigators announced they had made a huge break in the case. Based off evidence gathered, investigators suspect that 3 men went to the Freeman trailer that night and killed both Kathy and Danny before taking the 2 girls. The 3 suspects were identified as Warren Phillip Phil Welch II David A. Pennington and Ronnie Busick. Pennington and Welch were deceased by the time they were named as suspects, but Busick was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of arson. Witnesses and informants described Welch as being the one who was the mastermind of the kidnappings and killings, and called him evil. Welch died in 2007, and Pennington died in 2015. Welch was known to be violent, and even the police were fearful of him. He has a criminal history which included violence against women. Pennington had a similar record to Welch's. Busick mainly got into trouble due to drug usage. In February of 2017, investigators found old previously unknown documents that were described as being extremely viable in solving the cases. Apparently, these notes were left over from a previous sheriff administration and had been misplaced. Included in these documents were the notes of a private investigator on the case. The private investigator had an old insurance verification card in his possession. The card was found near the burnt-down trailer by searchers just days after the crimes took place. The card belonged to the ex-girlfriend of Welch in 1999. The girlfriend stated she did not know the Freeman family at the time of their murders and had never been to the residence at any point prior to the crimes. She did admit that Welch knew Danny. She also did not know how the card would have ended up there. Welch previously lived as a neighbor of the Freeman family until about a few months before the slayings. Initially, the insurance card was given little to no credence by investigators. In fact, they refused to take it into evidence, so the private investigator kept it instead. The private investigator was able to determine that the insurance card was linked to a blue Mercury Topaz, which had been salvage yard. He told the police of the vehicle, but they refused to take it into evidence. They even attempted to have the private investigator's state licensee revoked for interfering in their investigation. The insurance card would later be used as proof in the case. Investigators acted on information provided in the notes and were able to find witnesses who would help link the three men to the crimes. One of these witnesses was a woman who previously dated Pennington and recalled how he was physically abusive towards her and threatened her life. He previously bragged to her about killing the Freemans during a bad drug deal. Danny Freeman was known to cultivate and sell a high-grade marijuana product at the time of his murder. The three suspects allegedly went to the Freeman trailer that night to collect on a drug debt at approximately 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. Welch was carrying a loaded shotgun under his trench coat at the time. Danny was expecting the three men and was well aware that they were coming over that night. It's unknown what exactly occurred next. It's believed a dispute between the men occurred and Danny went for his gun. Welch fatally shot Danny in the head. He then went into the master bedroom and shoved Kathy onto the water before shorting her in the head as well. Busick told investigators he later learned that Welch dragged Danny's body into the master bedroom and left him next to the water. Autopsy reports confirm this bit of information since Danny and Kathy were both found in the master bedroom. Kathy was found face down on the water with her head shot. When the shorting started, Ashley and Laurie ran away the trailer through the back door which was next to Ashley's bedroom. They both reportedly hid in a field. Pennington allegedly remained in his truck during the shootings. After the shootings, Pennington and Welch ransacked the house. They then poured gasoline around a wood-burning stove in the living room and set the mobile home ablaze. Welch was known to carry gasoline with him at the time. When Pennington returned to his truck, he had an unknown amount of money and unknown amount of marijuana. He had gotten the drugs from a trash can in the master bedroom of the home. After the trailer home was set ablaze, Ashley and Laurie fled the open field and attempted to escape. They were frantic and fearful as they ran in different directions trying to escape the men. They were eventually cornered and kidnapped. The men even once said if they wouldn't have taken off running they would still be alive. Pennington and Welch even referred to the girls as two little bitches after the crimes. After both girls were captured, they were tied up with rope that Welch and Pennington had gotten from the bedroom of Danny and Kathy. Socks were also stuffed into their mouths. The men did return eventually to check on the four after the crimes. It's believed this is when the insurance card fell out of the vehicle. The girls were allegedly taken to Welch's trailer in Pitcher where they were held against their will. Busick told a witness that the girls were kept alive for approximately 2 weeks after their abductions. While held captive, Laurie and Ashley were tortured and raped before being strangled to death. Investigators believe the girls' remains were thrown down some type of pit-like structure, possibly a mine. Multiple other witnesses stated the three men had boasted of their involvement in the case, and they even brandished Polaroid photographs of the two girls they had taken. In some of the photos, Ashley and Laurie were shown bound and gagged and lying on a bed. In others, they were shown to be duct-taped to chairs. There were approximately 10 to 15 photographs of the girls. The witnesses who saw the photographs were able to identify the bed that the girls were lying on and a blanket on that bed. The blanket belonged to Welch. Some of the photos even showed Welch lying next to the girls. In the spring of 2000, Welch began dating another woman who recalled that he had a missing poster of Ashley and Laurie nailed to the wall of his residence. Welch's girlfriend found the Polaroid photographs after he was taken to prison, and she recognized the girls from the missing posters. She took the photos to a friend's home, and when Welch got out of jail, he told her to never show the photos to anyone. He said, "Don't you ever tell anybody or you will end up in a pit. Like those two girls. Welch and Pennington appeared to be proud of what they did, and even forcibly showed someone the Polaroid photos years after the crimes. Witnesses were also threatened, and the men said they would end up in the same pit as Laurie and Ashley. As a result of the threats, these witnesses stayed silent for almost 20 years after the girls went missing. The photos were kept in a briefcase. By the time investigators learned of the photos, they had disappeared. It's possible they were out in the trunk of a vehicle that was hauled off for salvage. After Busick was arrested, he claimed he couldn't recall many of the details from the night of the murders and kidnappings. He also couldn't recall exactly where they dumped the bodies of the two girls. He has a low average IQ and sustained brain damage from excessive and extensive drug usage. He also suffered a gunshot to the head in 1978. An neuropsychologist found he had a hard time processing information. Despite this, Busick was found mentally competent to stand trial. In July of 2020, Busick guilty as an accessory to second-degree murder. Busick took a plea deal and said he would lead investigators to the location of Lauria and Ashley's remains. He told investigators that the girls were left in a root cellar of a residence near 6th and Ethel and Pitcher, but nothing was found. He had until August 31st to help locate the girls, but he failed to do so. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison and 5 years probation. At the time of her disappearance, Ashley was described as a well-behaving teenager who was part of the National Honor Society. She was Welch High School basketball player in 1999. She was unable to play during the season due to an ankle injury. Ashley and Lauria remain missing, and foul play is suspected in the case.
Number 3.
William was last seen in Miami, Florida on April 16, 1973. He was last seen with his father, William Henry Forshee Sr., and 2 other men, Minnie Benny Gaskins and DeWitt Lewis. They all reportedly went on a fishing trip in an 18-foot outboard boat and were on an overnight trip to Marco Island. The men and William never returned to shore and were never seen or heard from again. Police discovered the boat trailer at Captain's Landing Marina in the 1000 block of Bald Eagle Drive on Marco Island. They also found the truck the men used, which was a green-colored 1969 Ford F-100 with Florida state license plates. The boat was never located, and none of the missing passengers have ever been found. Investigators are unsure if the men met with a catastrophe out on the water. It should be noted that another man named Robert Stone also disappeared during the same time period from Fort Myers, Florida. It's unclear if his boat, a 14-foot vessel, was ever found. William's disappearance remains unsolved. Foul play is suspected in the case. He and the men he was traveling with have never been located.
Number 2.
Eiler was last seen in Hollywood, Florida on January 30, 1999. At the time of her disappearance, Pilar was in the custody of her father, Marco Rodriguez, and he gave permission to the child's babysitter, Melissa Cooper, to take her on vacation for 2 weeks. She never returned the child to her father, and Pilar has never been seen or heard from again. Marco filed a missing child report on Pilar on February 22, 1999. According to reports, Cooper took Pilar to the Trail Apartments in Punta Gorda, Florida, which is approximately 135 miles away from her home in Hollywood. The apartment belonged to Cooper's on-off boyfriend, Keith Allen Wilson. After Pilar's disappearance was reported, investigators discovered that neither Wilson nor Cooper had her in their company. They both made various claims as to how the child disappeared. It was at one point claimed that Marco actually picked Pilar up from the apartment, but this is not true, and Marco hasn't seen his daughter since January 30th. Wilson also claimed he saw evidence that Pilar was physically abused before she came to the apartment. Marco was extensively investigated by authorities regarding his daughter's case, but no evidence was found to indicate he was involved in her disappearance. They also found no evidence that he abused her. He did have a criminal record which included battery and a DUI, but he is not considered a suspect in her disappearance. Wilson later changed the story of events and said that Cooper, who is diabetic and dependent on insulin, collapsed inside of a store and was hospitalized as a result. When she returned to the room, Pilar was gone. Cooper denies Wilson's statement and says it's untrue. Cooper didn't return to southern Florida. Instead, she traveled to Wisconsin where an aunt lived. Cooper was located at her aunt's home. She told investigators that she fled the apartment after Wilson became physically abusive towards her and Pilar. According to Cooper, Pilar's last few weeks living with them was filled with abuse, which started after Cooper told Wilson Marco appeared to direct sexual advances towards her before she left with Pilar. According to reports, Wilson did not want Pilar in his home and would subject her to cruel and unjustified punishments. He would force her to stay awake through nights by making her stand up, and she would sleep inside of a closet when this wasn't occurring. He also made her wear a dog collar and leash which he would tie to the bed frame. Wilson also cut Pilar's hair to a shorter length, so she looked like a boy. Wilson also allegedly sexually abused Pilar during her time in the apartment. He allegedly sexually assaulted her just a few days before her alleged murder. On February 12 or 13, Wilson became angry and punched Pilar with a closed fist, which caused her to hit her head on either the floor or the wall of the room. She apparently complained of headaches and would have convulsions and diarrhea before she died the next day. Wilson came home from work and decided to dispose of the body. It hasn't been found. Wilson denied Cooper's statements and implicated her in the child's presumed death. Cooper claimed she didn't seek medical attention for Pyler because she feared Wilson. He also didn't seek medical attention, since they would have seen the noticeable signs of abuse he caused upon Pyler. Cadaver dogs were brought to the apartment and reacted to the sofa, the floor of his home, and the trunk of his car. Investigators also discovered traces of blood near the bathroom which were compared to Pyler's parents and matched. However, due to the varying statements made from Cooper and Wilson and the lack of evidence, neither of them were initially charged in the case. Cooper claimed that Wilson physically and mentally abused her for many years, and he also allegedly tortured her dog. He would reportedly choke, beat, and forcibly have sexual intercourse with her. She broke up with him and moved to her mother's home in Hollywood. That's when she started babysitting Pyler. Investigators were determined to locate the remains of Pyler and bring closure to her case. Her disappearance caused sadness in the area, and many searches took place when she originally disappeared, but none uncovered any evidence of her whereabouts. In early November 1999, investigators drained Preacher's Lake. The man-made lake was a popular swimming fishing area in Charlotte County, Florida, and it was known for its dense population of alligators. It was a several hundred-yard body of water which came to authorities' attention after two teenagers reported they saw a small skeletal hand poking out of the murky waters. The sighting occurred the previous March, but investigators hoped they'd find something. Wilson knew the area and drove by the lake normally to visit a relative. Investigators discovered a few child-sized t-shirts and a torn-out page from a Winnie Pooh book. One of the t-shirts found resembles one owned by Pyler, as it had a picture of Winnie Pooh, and she also had a book about Winnie, who was her favorite Disney character. Investigators also found unspecified matter which they believe is a trace of Pyler's body. After this, the investigation was reclassified as a probable homicide and is continually investigated as such. The Peace River in Charlotte County was also searched for Pyler's remains in 2001, but nothing was found. Her case went cold for years after that. The investigation into Pyler's disappearance was reopened in 2009, and in late August of 2010, investigators made an arrest in Pyler's presumed death. They arrested Cooper, who was by then known as Melissa Harding Jones, and charged her with first-degree aggravated manslaughter in the child's death. The warrant for her arrest stated that Cooper failed to protect Pyler from injury at the hands of another person, which causing her death through culpable negligence. She was living in Washington state at the time of her arrest and waived extradition to Charlotte County to be prosecuted for her role in Pyler's death. In July of 2013, however, Cooper reached a plea agreement with prosecutors in which she will plead guilty as an accessory to murder in exchange for her testimony against Keith Wilson. Wilson was considered the primary suspect in Pyler's disappearance for many years. He was arrested on July 16, 2013, and charged with murder in Pyler's case. His arrest came after new information led to him being implicated in her death. Wilson's stepfather, Jesse Clapham, claimed that he saw Pyler's body wrapped in a pink blanket in the back of Wilson's car with her foot sticking out. Wilson said it was Pyler's body, and he subsequently told Clapham that investigators would never find Pyler's remains, since he allegedly dumped them in a septic tank. It's also possible he buried her body in a black trash bag in an open field. He was charged with second-degree murder. He was tried for the crime in October of 2017. Marco, Cooper, and Clapham all testified against him, and he was eventually found guilty of second-degree murder after the jury deliberated for 3 hours. He was sentenced to life in prison for killing Pyler. Cooper is facing 30 years in prison for her role in the child's death. Investigators hope to find Pyler's remains and bring closure to her family. She remains missing and foul play is highly suspected in her case.
Number 4.
Jennifer was last seen in Kansas City, Missouri on January 22, 1998. She was reportedly last seen leaving the campus of East High School at 9:30 a.m. after getting into an altercation with a few other students. She never returned home after that and was never seen or heard from again. Her mother, Glenda Lamont, was worried when her daughter didn't return home. She learned from a school clerk that Jennifer fit classes that day and didn't return to the school. When more time passed, she became frantic and began searching and calling people to help find her. She even called the bus driver, who said Jennifer did not get on the bus that afternoon. None of her friends or her father saw her that day. She filed a missing child report after not being able to find her. Investigators initially believed Jennifer had left on her own accord, and they listed her as a runaway. She had a somewhat chaotic life prior to her disappearance. She had recently transferred to East High School from Ruskin High School, and reportedly felt threatened by students from her new school. Jennifer also moved between the homes of her mother and stepfather and her father and stepmother. Despite this, her family maintained she wouldn't go off on her own. In fact, she had plans to take her driver's test on the afternoon of her disappearance. She never made it to the test. Her family and friends hung up posters with her information and her picture. They also sent posters out as far as the state of California. They also enlisted the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who classified her disappearance as a non-family abduction. Investigators eventually reclassified the case as a probable abduction. Jennifer's disappearance remained a mystery for nearly a year until December of 1998. On December 16, 1998, a man named Wesley Ira Perkey confessed that he abducted, raped, and murdered a woman from Kansas City, Missouri. He was shown a photo lineup of the possible victim and picked Jennifer's photo from the bunch without hesitation. According to his original confession, Perkey stated he came across Jennifer at a local grocery store and forcibly abducted her into his car. He claimed he took her to his home in Lansing, Kansas, where he raped her and stabbed her to death repeatedly when she attempted to escape. He allegedly kept her body in a toolbox before he dismembered and burned her remains. He said he dumped Jennifer's ashes in a septic pond over 200 miles away. Perkey states he would cooperate fully in the investigation if he was transferred to a federal prison as opposed to a state prison. He also led investigators to the location where he allegedly dumped Jennifer's undergarments and her jawbone. They were not found. Investigators have conducted several searches in several different areas for her remains, but they weren't ever found. Her remains are believed to be unrecoverable based off the details in Perkey's confession. Wesley has an extensive criminal record dating back to a 1975 robbery he would be paroled for. In 1980, Wesley and a friend robbed and shot a man in the head twice. The victim survived the attack. He was originally given a sentence of 15 years to life in prison, but was paroled in March of 1997 and set free. At the time of his confession, Perkey was in prison for murdering Mary Ruth Bales. She was 80 years old when Perkey met her. He was working for a plumbing company and arrived to her house to fix a leaking faucet. He asked for cash so he could purchase tools to perform the duty. Perkey left her home to go get the tools. He instead purchased crack cocaine and additionally brought a prostitute back to Bales' home. There, he beat her to death with a hammer. Mary was previously a polio victim as a child. Investigators are convinced Perkey was responsible for Jennifer's abduction and subsequent murder. He reportedly knew details only Jennifer's loved ones would know she herself would know. On October 10, 2001, Perkey was charged with Jennifer's death. During the trial phase, he recanted the abduction portion and claimed Jennifer got into his car willingly after he asked her to come to his home to smoke crack cocaine and drink gin with orange juice. Nonetheless, he was convicted of kidnapping and killing Jennifer in 2003 and was sentenced to death. There was a false report that came out in 2004 and it claimed Jennifer's body was found in January of that year. This is false, and Jennifer remains listed as a missing child with probable foul play. Perkey's execution stalled many times, and there was much debate as to whether it was an appropriate punishment for his crimes. He also had dementia and Alzheimer's by the time he was executed. He was sexually abused by multiple family members as a child, including his mother and grandmother. On July 16, 2020, Wesley Perkey was killed by lethal injection in the morning. He apologized to Jennifer's family and friends before he was killed and said this sanitized murder really does not serve no purpose whatsoever. Her family says they'll never get closure because Jennifer will likely never be recovered. Perkey's execution was the first federal execution since 2003. At the time of her disappearance, Jennifer enjoyed art, music and wanted to be a storm chaser when she grew up. She was described as a shy, gentle tomboy who loved her cat named Clyde. The cat would even wait by the door at 4 p.m. for Jennifer to return home from school. In 2018, community members raised enough money and established a park bench in Jennifer's memory. Jennifer's remains have never been located, but foul play is strongly suspected in her case. Her case is considered closed by police.
Number 5.
The database for a national clearinghouse for missing and exploited children lists the names of more than 200 Arizona children who have vanished over the past several decades. If they are still alive, many would be adults now, including James Jimmy Hendrickson, who was 12 when he was last seen in Tucson 29 years ago. The rest of Jimmy's family was vacationing in Mexico for a week in the summer of 1991, but he decided to stay behind with a trusted family friend. He spent the night of July 11 with a family babysitter's sister and was last seen playing a video game about 10 p.m. that night. When Hendrickson family returned home about a week later, the babysitter told them Jimmy was missing. But no one had filed a report with police. The boy's mother and sister rushed the police department to file a missing persons report, according to media reports. Jimmy, who would have been a 6th grader at Amphi Middle School that fall, had no history of running away, according to the Charlie Project website, which has about 13,000 profiles of missing persons cold cases. But he was considered streetwise, and police thought he had left on his own accord. 14 days later, police began investigating the boy's disappearance. The Arizona Daily Star wrote in a 2015 report on the 24th anniversary of the date Jimmy was last seen. Investigators combed through junkyards, searched the desert around Tucson, and asked around the North Side neighborhood where he was last seen, but there was no trace of him. Police think he left the home in the 700 block of West Paris Promenade about 8 a.m. on June 12 to walk to his home in the 200 block of East Delano Street. Witnesses reported seeing him about 8 that night at a Circle K convenience store in the vicinity of West Grant and North Oracle Roads. But the case went cold, and police suspect foul play. Tammy Tacho, who was 17 when her younger brother vanished, talked to news station KGUN about the toll Jimi Hendrickson's disappearance has taken on her family. The story was broadcast Thursday. "I thought we were in a nightmare. I thought we were going to wake up from this, and Jimmy was going to come home. All this was a nightmare, but we couldn't wake up from this because all of it was true," she said. In 2016, after her brother had been missing for 25 years, Tacho obtained the 1-inch thick file on the case from the Tucson Police Department. Containing statements taken by investigators and tips people had called into police, it dispelled any illusion Tacho had that her brother was still alive. "I'm very upset because once you read that report you know Jimmy is no longer missing. You know he's been gone since that night that he disappeared," Tacho told KGUN. She believes someone knows what happened to her brother, who would now be 41 years old. Anyone with information is asked to call 88 Crime.